It's showtime. Welcome, everybody. If you are here already, fantastic. Sean, I should have done this earlier on, but we were so excited in our conversation. Now, if you look to the right-hand side of your page, there is the comment section where people can join and ask questions. So just keep an eye out for there. Whilst I'm rambling along and trying to fill a little bit of time before we really get started, if you are here already, please say hello. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and get some questions prepared, because your questions will always be better than mine, because you know exactly what you want to know from Sean, right? But I'm very happy to be here with Sean. A lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and I'm fighting off my imposter syndrome. So yeah, it should be cool.
Rich, you asked really good questions, so don't discount yourself. Your questions were really great.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take that. Look, confidence booster before we start. He knows the psychology. He knows what he's doing. But we'll get going in a minute. Just giving people a chance to join. Best said, if you are here, please add something to the comments just to know we are talking to somebody. Although, actually, I make care if we don't talk to anybody. It's more about us sharing some knowledge and for people to be able to watch back. But I'm excited to have this conversation. It's really weird, a different way of looking at the organisation, I guess. Actually, just the input or the output of performance from a different angle, which I don't think I've covered yet in the 80 episodes I've done. Okay. Sean, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do
it. Let's go.
Let's go. Welcome, everybody, again. Thank you for joining us. Sean, thank you for joining me as well. I'm really excited to have this conversation around how organizations impact individuals. And probably we'll look at leaderships and teams' performance and output and what their role is on that area. I'm obviously joined by Sean, who has lots of experience, and I'm not going to butcher his introduction because I always find people do. I'd much rather Sean give us his introduction, but I'm very excited. And what I'll do, Sean, quickly is I'll just introduce myself so the listeners know who I am if they don't know who I am already. My name's Rich. I am a high-performance exec coach, leadership coach, helping organizations improve how they perform, both from a individual, team, and leadership standpoint. I use lessons from sports because my background from sport to help people understand that. So creating different examples and different lessons from the elite, from the greatest teams, or some of the greatest teams of all time, right? So using those to give us examples. I'm also the founder of Employers Health, which this podcast, LinkedIn Live, whatever you want to call this, is connected to. And yeah, very glad. Now, so Employers Health, I had a beep in my head and took me off track, Sean. But yeah, no, Employers Health is a workplace wellbeing company offering education for teams and individuals for employees' wellbeing. And someone is trying to talk to me on LinkedIn, and this is why I'm getting beeps. Can you hear that, Sean?
No, I can't hear a beep.
Fantastic. So I just have to learn to ignore it, but we'll move. I'm going to shut up and stop rambling. Sean, as I said, I don't want to butcher your introduction. Could you please introduce yourself? Tell me who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Sean. I am the founder of a company called Brighton. And Brighton has a very clear purpose to help leaders and organizations shine. It's called Brighton for a reason. And I guess in terms of how it does that, the business is split in three. So the first part, which is really going to kind of move into what we're going to talk about today, really kind of leverages my expertise in organizational transactional analysis, or TA for short. And that's supporting organizational dynamics, typically working with executive teams on any issue that they might be currently facing. So recent things I've been involved in is a C-suite saying, hey, is our strategy fit for purpose? Or we've just done a project that's tanked and we need to do a lessons learned, or we're a new board and we don't know how we're going to add value. And what I do is help them through that process. The other part is leadership development, which captures everything from coaching to designing and delivering programs. And the third part of the business is all around sales, both in terms of supporting people with their presentation techniques, and actually working on real bids so that clients can actually win business. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Yeah, wicked. Thank you. How have you got to where you are? What's the experience?
How have I got to where I am? So originally, I trained as an actor. I was an
I knew
actor.
this, but I didn't realize. Yeah, it was proper.
Yeah, a proper training.
Yeah.
And I think I think that really kind of stimulated my interest in behavior and psychology, because as an actor, you're always like trying to imagine, well, what is another person's experience? It's very behavioral. And ultimately it's about connection as well. You're connecting with an audience. And then in full transparency, I was resting, which basically means that's theatre jargon for I was out of work. And just got a job to earn some money to go on a holiday.
Whilst resting.
Yeah, whilst I was resting. And very quickly kind of transitioned into what was then called training, their training department. And I loved it. And if I'm honest, there was initially, it was about being in front of a crowd and, razzle dazzle kind of stuff. But yeah, I really got into behavior. And since then, it's just progressed. I've naturally gone from like training, like product, to management development, to organizational development, to organizational psychology. So it's kind of, that's how I got into it. I didn't start off. It's just I fell into it.
Yeah, whilst resting.
Whilst resting.
I enjoy that. I'm sorry. It's interesting. Actually, it's a really interesting thing. My brain's going, I can see how acting could play really useful as a trainer, right? Being able to present well, all those kind of skills.
It's really interesting because I think there's lots of processes. I must write a book one day, but theatre does without even thinking, which many organizations struggle with. So, an example would be feedback. If you're an actor, like every single rehearsal you have, the director will give, well, it's not called feedback in theatre, it's called notes. You have notes, which is, this is what you did well, this is what I want. And you have notes all the time. And if a director didn't give you notes, you would think they're not a great director. So this thing like performance alignment, whether you're the 17th spear carrier on the left, the director's vision for the production, commercial acumen, like Romeo and Juliet's been done 100 times. How do you make it commercially successful? So I think it's not only the performance side, I actually think the process of theatre is really additive, but I digress.
No, it's really interesting because my brain goes to sport and it's very similar, right? Yeah. Like they will have, and I was speaking to somebody from the army, they have a cold debrief and a warm debrief. And I think it's very similar to sport, where at that elite level that you're giving micro and macro feedback. How did the team perform? How did you perform in that team? But also from a skill standpoint, how did you perform? Could you do that better? And it's just feedback. Whereas working with clients, there's such a invisible line between getting that and even just feeling comfortable to give it, I guess, as well. But we digress, as you said. How can organizations impact individuals' performance? Let's start with that question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it points to I'm going to use the word org-TA rather than saying organizational transactional analysis, because in total transparency, I struggle sometimes to say properly. So I'll say org-TA. A central hypothesis of org-TA is the organization is always in the individual. So if we think of performance, to understand the individual, we need to understand the organization. as well.
Mhm.
And a central theme of org TA is that if we don't understand the organization, we are in danger of pathologizing the individual. I think this is the performance disruption is you, and actually a dynamic of their performance, if it's a disruption, may well be theirs, but it's always shared, meaning that they are reflecting something going on in the system, be that the organization at the same time. And that dynamic that they're reflecting might be conscious, but a lot of the time it's unconscious. So they're linked. To understand performance, the individual and the organization have a symbiotic relationship.
Can I have an example just to help people understand?
Yeah. So one example that I worked with, I can remember many years ago, there was a leader in an organization whose behavior was, if I'm polite, very questionable. Bullying, harassment, some of the practices the leader applied would be in breach of employment legislation. So it was really tempting to think, this leader is an awful leader. But I can remember, and this was years before I took up org TA, I can remember I was responsible for succession planning. And, in a succession planning meeting where I had the executive team, when it came to this leader's, when we came to discuss this leader, it was move on. We'll go to we don't want to talk about this person. This person was making lots of money for the organization. So if I apply my org TA head, what the organization was doing was ignoring this behavior, which gave the leader license just to carry on the way they were. So yes, there might have been individual proclivities in the leader, but it was being reinforced by the fact the organization was ignoring it. So that issue may have been in part the leaders, but was being amplified by the organization. The other thing I've bumped into, and again, this happened before I had an awareness of org TA. I can remember working with one organization, and the number of times I would work with leaders where the root cause was a lack of structure, particularly around employee life cycle processes like performance management, feedback, and la-di-da-di-da. And I can remember I had the fortune of speaking to one of the founders of this organization who very proudly said, yeah, we don't have any silly rules. I thought, that's why we don't have structure. Because structure within the narrative of the organization was cast with a negative shadow. It really came to a head when that organization was bought by another organization. The biggest pain point was trying to align to new processes. It was almost like a dirty word in the organization.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because as you're talking, my brain goes back to where we started in regards to feedback.
Yeah.
Because that is it's just an awareness piece, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It's really, if there is something in the system that is avoidant of feedback, it will impact the people in the organization. So it's always shared. It's always shared. And I really noticed that viscerally now that I run my own business. I think whenever I was inside an organization, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I had this awareness of, how I fit in the organization, and who are my supporters, who do I need to work on. And I know that's sound business practice, but I was aware of the system I was in. Whereas now, only my own business, I have different concerns. Where's my next bit of revenue coming from?
Yeah. How does that impact the employee?
Well, it does give me we talk in OrgTA about the three principles are of a practitioner are potency, permission, and protection. And what I notice now that I'm outside an organization, I feel comfortable being far more potent than I was when I was inside an organization. Because again, there will be subliminal messages about how potent you can be.
I'm going to sneeze, hold on. Bless me.
Oh, bless you.
Thank you. That's a nice addition. Hope the recorders enjoy that. Or the listeners, sorry. Okay. And so I want to go back to just this main core principle of the organization is always in the individual, and ask you to explain what that means for leaders trying to improve teams and individuals.
Well, for me, if I were to zoom into coaching, a lot of the coaching I do, I'm sponsored by an organization. So in other words, an organization will approach me and say, person X, we would like you to work with them on coaching. And one of the questions I always ask a coachee is, okay, how much of this challenge is yours? And how much is the organization's? And even the question itself is very enlightening. So from a coaching perspective, I would always ask that question. Then it depends on how the individual is positioned in the organization, whether they can impact the system or whether they can't. And then it becomes a choice point for the individual. I guess in terms of working with leaders, and it's not, I don't expect, all leaders to be psychologists. So it's about entering that conversation at the right level. So the organization will typically have very stated intentions, one would hope so, in terms of its strategy, its plan, and its value set. So working with leaders to understand how that impacts their work would be critical.
Okay.
I'm sensing, have I answered your question, Rich? Because I'm sensing, I'm not sure whether you're processing or whether I've confused you.
I'm processing, just trying to process how I asked the next question. Because I know one of the things you talk about, and which I know you work with clients, is the boundary model.
Yeah.
Is that something that at that point you would then bring into this conversation, or is this something which is there as an awareness?
Yeah, the boundary model is something, what I love about it, it's conceptually very simple. And when it's explained to a client, it usually has, my usual experience of working with it creates lots of aha models. Would it be useful? I've got a slide to share. Would it be useful just to explain what the boundary model is and put it up very quickly, and
Yeah,
then
sure.
we can chat about how it works? Would that help?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to just ask. Mark, my guest from last week, has actually just added a comment here saying inadvertently rewarding the wrong behavior only encourages more of that behavior.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm guessing that's kind of leading in. Is that connected to the organization, or is that? I guess that's maybe part of the process, and that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. I mean, essentially, what we will do, as human beings, we will gravitate to what is rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean necessarily financial reward, but if we see a certain behavior being encouraged,
Mm-hmm.
we will move towards that in a system.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, there is one school of thought, which is, forgive me if I quote this wrong, which says like the leadership capabilities will be capped at the lowest level of behavior you deem acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Um,
My
Rich-
other thing, just thinking about reward here, and it's interesting to see if because you said about like the behavior being rewarded, but sometimes when I think about output, when I think about well-being side of this, is if somebody has kind of worked hard, achieved something, a project, gets
yeah,
rewarded for the project, but the way they've achieved that is unhealthy,
yeah.
unproductive, causing lots of strain to team members, all that kind of stuff, but that gets rewarded. Does that reward think that it has the same impact, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could really, we're segueing into like kind of like performance management systems. What is rewarded? Is it pure output? Is it just results, or how you do stuff, or what type of performance management system
Mhm.
have you got? Is it just purely results output, or is it competence based as well? Is it contribution? Does it look at both?
Mhm.
So
Would
yeah.
that come under the silly rules concept here?
Yeah. Shall I just enlarge this so that it's in? So on the screen, which I'm hoping everyone can see, is Eric Byrne, who is the founder of Transactional Analysis. This is the boundary model. So very simply, this circle represents an organization. And an organization, and this is a simplification. Clearly, organizations can be very, very complex. And the letters A through to H are different departments or functions within that organization. And in the middle of the organization is a group of people who describe themselves as leaders. So this is how Byrne pictorially describes an organization. He said interesting things happen at boundaries. So there is an external boundary, which is the perimeter, it's the outer circle. You're either in the organization or you're not. So, for example, if you're an employee, the way that you get into that circle is typically through an employment contract.
Mm-hmm.
You're employed by the organization, which means you can join. There are often pressures on boundaries. So, in terms of the external boundary, pressures would be it's timely that we're just about to go into the budget in November. Whatever the Chancellor decides will impact all organizations. So there will be a pressure on that boundary. If you were, for example, let's keep it in your world of sport, if you were a gym, if you owned a gym, and then someone opened a gym half a mile away, that would put a pressure on your boundary. So there's always pressure on the boundary, on the external boundary. There's also pressure on that middle boundary where leaders sit, and that could be, a change of leadership, a new CEO, a new functional leader. What Burns says is that agitation happens at boundaries. I'll stop sharing, by the way, so I can see you.
Perfect.
He describes agitation happens at boundaries. Agitation is another word for games. And in an organizational context, we recognize games as politics with a little p. So I'm not talking about your political allegiance, whether you're conservative or Labour or la. I'm talking about internal politics. And what Byrne argues is that if those boundaries aren't firm, employees will put their energy into playing games or playing politics rather than delivering value to the organization. So Byrne would argue that one of the fundamental role of leaders is to stabilize boundaries. Because without a degree of stabilization, employees' energy will go into playing the game. So I'm often curious when I work with an organization about how political it is, what games are being played, because that will give me insight into, are those boundaries really wobbling all over the place, or are they firm enough so that employees and leaders, I will include leaders in the term employees, anyone who works inside an organization can start to work in a way that adds value to them rather than playing the game. And I see this all the time.
When you said earlier on, when you work with companies, what are you looking out for? What is for you? What are the signs or things you look for in that political or gamemanship? What are you looking out for?
Well, first thing, it's typically at one level, it's about having conversations with stakeholders. But you can also get a sense of it, like from attrition. Are they really turning people over like at a really alarming rate? You can inquire into the employee relations environment in an organization. There are loads of disciplinaries and grievances going on. You can look at things like absence levels. Is absence really high? So there are indicators in addition to speaking to stakeholders that would suggest instability. What I would add, though, in any human system, an organization is one. I personally don't think you can be 100% game free.
Yeah.
Put a group of people together, make them compete for limited resources. There will be a degree of game playing. It's whether that game playing optimizes the performance of the organization.
Yeah. Do you speak to the individuals? I should say, to the people outside of being the leader, that group of leadership. Do you speak to those? Do you survey them? How do you get their input in this?
So I would typically spend, it depends on, in full transparency, it depends on the nature of the contract with the client. So ideally, it would be interfacing at loads of different levels. Usually, I would work by interviewing the members of the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
If it is an organization that has got an operation that is accessible to the public, like a retailer,
Mm-hmm.
you can actually start to get intel
Mm-hmm.
by going into the retailer, going into the store environment.
Mm-hmm.
You start to get information.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if they have survey data, for example, engagement data, or if they have any additional data sources, I would always ask for that. Because for me, it's like the way I work is, try and look at the organization from as many different perspectives as possible, one of which is speaking to stakeholders, but also data. The more data informed it can be, the more angles you can look at it, the better.
How can leaders firm up those cross sections?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some. I always say, it's simple conceptually, but harder to execute. One of the ways being really clear what we're here for. Going back to good old things like purpose. And when I talk about purpose, Simon Sinek in his book, it starts with why, describes it, beautifully. It's why we do what we do. So in terms of my organization, what I do is organizational development and leadership development and bid management. My why is to help people shine. That is the purpose, to help people shine. So on one level, it's being really clear, not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And it's sound business practices, like having a really sound business plan that everyone understands.
And is clear.
Having alignment in your performance management system. So wherever you are in the organization, you understand how the work you do is contributing. Now, conceptually, it's quite easy. It can be harder to execute. I mean, I segue, but I think it's pertinent to the conversation. I can remember working with a board, and they had a real lack of clarity around purpose. And I was speaking to the chairman, and the chairman was a man, and kept saying, "Well, people should know, and people should do this." And I said, "Well, maybe the next step is stop making assumptions that people understand what you want."
That word assumption, I love it.
There was people should be able to. Well, that might be right on one level, but an exchange of expectations, clarity. It's from a thematic point of view, it's simple stuff. But I get the bigger an organization gets, particularly if it's global and on different time zones and different cultures and blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying it's easy to execute, but if people aren't clear, what happens psychologically is that people's individual frames of reference and proclivities take over. And that's when you start getting games.
What was I going to ask you? I had a question connected to this.
Just take
it up. Have a better cup of tea whilst I ask this question. I want to go back to the purpose piece, because I'm obviously fellow coach. You see the impact of purpose, and when people have that purpose, you're motivated. The thing I'm interested in, or the thing I want to ask you is it's great for a team and a leader to have a purpose for the organization, or the leaders to have a purpose for the organization. What happens when the individual or an employee outside of the leadership group, his purpose is just to come to work, to pay the bills, to have a good life outside of work?
For me, that's fine.
Mhm.
That's fine. You know, when I and if I'm not answering the question that you're putting to me, please interrupt me and just
Yeah,
read.
it's just
I don't have a kind of, you know, for some people, work and being success to them is not their work.
yeah. I completely agree with you. Mine's it's the impact on those boundaries.
Yeah.
And how much is it affecting those boundaries if maybe they're not buying into that because their why isn't connected to the organization's why, and that's maybe the affection of the boundary.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it's a really good question, which is the coach's way of giving yourself time to think. I guess, you know, and this is me thinking about it. You know, if I answered it on one level, I'd say, well, yeah. Whatever our view of success is, there's something about it's a fundamental need we all have. It's built into our biology, which is about belonging.
Mhm,
And regardless of, you know, if someone just wants to come to work because, you know, their life is not their job.
mhm,
You know, they have other interests outside of work, which, you know, they are focused on, and that is what is important to them. There is something about, I mean, organizations always exist to add value of
mhm,
some kind. You know, the degree to which an organization can maximize value is helping a person connect and feel belonging. And even if that connection is really minimal,
mhm,
it can really cumulatively add value. There's a wonderful story, and I think this is an urban myth.
mhm,
And you know, in some iterations of the story, it's JFK, Kennedy. Sometimes it's Obama. Sometimes it's Clinton. So you know, the modern myth changes.
Sounds, sounds like it's definitely American, though, but
Yeah,
sounds.
it's an American story, and apparently, let's go. The president of the US was walking around NASA,
Mhm,
as you do.
mhm,
You know, those are the rockets, and that's
mhm,
the R&D department. And the president, this is an urban myth, by the way,
mhm,
came across, well, they call it a janitor. We would call it a cleaner,
mhm,
who was cleaning, you know, the
mhm,
floor, and the cleaner made a big thing about getting out of the way, saying, "Hey, I'm just the janitor around here." And the president said, "No, you put man on the moon. You helped put man on the moon."
mhm, mhm,
And for me, that really, I think, where even if a person's life and interest and focus, their being is not about the job, because they have other things, that ability to connect, knowing that you're valued and understanding the part you play is hugely powerful. For me, it's ethical,
mhm.
and it's also, if I put my business head on, it helps leverage and create value at the same time.
Yeah, I think as I had a chance to think about that question and flip it on its head slightly, is I think if your purpose is to go to work because it pays the bills and gives you an opportunity to do things outside of work, it's not the reason for your purpose, or doesn't connect your purpose. But that's fine. But I think if that organization was something which you didn't believe with, and
Yeah,
politically, or had a opposing opposing view to what that did, let's say you're a vegan and you work in a meat eating company,
yeah,
let's say you would feel that wouldn't fill your purpose either. So it's actually it's okay on a level, but as long as it connects still at some point somewhere, definitely can't oppose that purpose and the values you have.
Definitely, I think it becomes really problematic if the organization's real purpose, which is not necessarily what an organization will put on the website, if that conflicts with your personal values. I can remember once working in an organization, and it was a sales organization, and we'd lost a big deal, and everyone was walking around like looking really morose. And I can remember speaking to my boss saying, look, we took part, and what can we learn by taking part? And my boss turned around to me and said, it's not about taking part, it's about winning. And I was like, well, that doesn't feel right. But at the end of the day, this company had the biggest market share in the industry. It was a sales, of course it was about winning, but actually my value set, it's not that the organization was wrong or I was right. And it wasn't a right and wrong issue. It was actually, I value learning by taking part, and this organization values winning. It's not that one is right or wrong, it's just clashing. So at that point, I thought, right, I need to leave. The organization's, the organization has a right to be how it wants to be. I didn't.
Now you say that, I can see the impact it has on the performance, thinking about like how this connects to the org's impact and the organizational TA stuff, right? So I can see that now. Makes sense. Look, I don't want to miss an opportunity to talk about the etiquette techniques in character framework, which I know you did work around. So look, I'm going to open it up. Can you introduce it for us?
Yeah, so I think this is I feel like being the BBC announcer. There are other models of organizational so Byrne describes culture from 3 lenses. He calls it etiquette, techniques, and character. So if I take each of those in turn, the etiquette of an organization is what the organization wants to be and what it presents to the outside world. So to use a shop, it's the shop window. So in an organization, the etiquette would be, what you can see on the website. It's often really important in the employee value proposition. It's what attracts you to an organization. I'll go there because they do this. It's also examples of, if we talk about leaders, it's leaders fulfilling what they say they want to be. So it's really stellar examples of behavior that conforms or aligns to how the organization is presenting itself. So that's the etiquette. Techniques is all of the infrastructure of an organization. So it would include its physical location. Is it multi-floor building? Is it a square building? Is it in the city center? Is it lots of different? Where is it? Is it open plan? Is it offices? So it's the physical infrastructure. It's also things like the IT infrastructure. What kit do you have? It would also include policies, procedures, training programs are part of the techniques. I love the word stuff. It's the stuff inside an organization. Character is your experience.
As an employee?
Yep. So it's the experience that you have. It's the reality. It also describes what happens to people under pressure. It's the pressure responses in an organization. What Byrne argues that for a culture to resonate and for it to translate into value creation, the etiquette, techniques, and character need a degree of alignment. If they're out of alignment, the culture won't resonate as effectively. So it might be, an example might be an organization intention is, we want to be agile. We want to disrupt the market. We want to come up with the latest thinking. But the process is, so firstly, they give you really shit kit. And the processes are really bureaucratic. Well, it's hard to deliver agility and disruption and innovation if your internal process is really slow.
It's like going to NASA and still working off of Windows 1.
Yeah.
It's the only example, like a really bad over the top example, but it's the one I went with.
So I use that diagnostically in an organization. So it goes, early on about, like, we were talking about the way of looking at an organization. What is it saying? What is its techniques, its stuff? And what is the reality? And how, and to what degree is there a consistent thread between those three things? I see it happen a lot in mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of work around the techniques. So things like harmonizing IT processes, policies. There's the whole world of 2P is about making sure that employment rights and benefits are comparable. And I see a lot of work around etiquette. This is the new brand. This is the new customer proposition. What often gets overlooked is the character. So I use it in a diagnostic capacity. And what I really like about it, when you explain it conceptually, people get it.
How do you audit it?
How do I audit it? So it's interesting. So if we take something like, I can remember, like, one of the first pieces of work I did was with a global organization to look at their induction process. So what I did was align the stuff that they did. Is it part of the etiquette? Is it part of the techniques? Is it part of the character? So that very quickly you got a sense of, is the consistency, or have we omitted a big chunk that helps people on board? So I can remember with this client, what they were really weak at was character. They were good at, like, this is the reason who we are. This is our strategy. And, you got all your kit and your processes on day one. But where they fell down on was the actual lived day-to-day experience. And that's where we did the work. So it was interesting with that organization. They had lots of tools and things that existed in the organization. There was aligning them, and there was also understanding where it was weak. And it was really useful for them to actually picture their induction intention from those different aspects.
Yeah, I love that example.
It's also sometimes, I'm sorry, Richard, I've just cut you off, which was very rude of me.
Oh, no, you go.
But I think it can also, you can actually use it diagnostically to determine where the weak spots are. Sometimes the weak spot is in etiquette, which is, why are you here? You know what you do, but why?
Mm-hmm.
and getting people to engage with that.
Got so many questions, and it opens up so many more questions, and probably another half an hour of conversation. But I am very conscious it's 10:02.
Well,
So I'm going to ask you one more question. What's one organizational factor impacting the performance levels of organizations and individuals that leaders are completely missing? So what is it that potentially people are missing from all of our conversation? It's the most common thing.
I think I would put it down as assumptions. There is an assumption. I mean, I could get into. I'm not going to use. I'm not going to get into the neurology of how the brain works.
Mm-hmm.
But
please,
for a second,
give me a little bit.
We all live in our own frame of reference. We all live in golden cages.
We do. Mine's gold. Mine's really gold.
Yours is shining. And there can be an assumption that we are aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, for me, is the biggest thing that leaders will overlook.
Mm-hmm.
They assume that people are clear.
Yeah.
So I would go back to, if I would say, what's the consistent thing?
Mm-hmm.
It's assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's really interesting because as a coach, it's the one thing I've pulled out so many times. Why you think that person knows, or there's this thinking. You think you know their thoughts. You think you know what they're trying to do, but there is the clarity.
Yeah.
What's actually what they're doing. Assumptions is really interesting. I love the concept of overcoming assumptions.
Yeah. And I think it's also, and maybe this is because how I am wired as an individual. I think from my experience that, if we're looking at what we perceive as a big problem, I often find organizations want big solutions to fix big problems. And I'm a real fan of gearing. What's the one thing we could change?
Mm-hmm.
Let's try and get to its DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to assumptions, I notice almost like I won't use the word reluctance or resistance. I don't, but like, just to go for simplicity, let's go back to basics. Like, when I think of like stabilizing boundaries, it's purpose, it's clarity. That's the biggest thing that can be done. I appreciate that might be hard to execute in a very complex structure, but the solution is quite simple. So yeah, assumptions and simplicity.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you also for the chat we had before. I really appreciate it. It was good to talk about coaching.
Yeah, thank you. No, appreciate it. No, just teasing the audience now with our pre-chat. But no, I really appreciate that. My brain, as you can tell, is going into lots of different thought wonders, thinking about simplicity and the work you do with clients all of the time, which makes such a big impact around just those two things, making things really clear and simple, and breaking down assumptions and remembering that we can't think what people think. We don't know what people think, which is interesting. But I really appreciate that. Thank you ever so much. For the viewers, if you're here still listening to us, keep your eye out for the next episode, which is next week, with Scott talking about performance. Scott's background is academy football. and so how he created performance from a different angle, which would be really interesting. So yeah, keep your eye out for that. Sign up, make sure you get a chance to watch it, ask questions. But if you want to watch this on repeat, it's going to be here, and it's going to be on YouTube and Spotify. And if you want those links, let me know. But otherwise, Sean, stay where you are. But thank you ever so much.
No, thank you.
And thank you, everybody else. Have a lovely, lovely weekend and lovely finish to the week. Take care. Bye-bye.